Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we step into a stone hall that smells faintly of wet straw and roasted arrogance. There's a fire, yes, but it doesn't reach the corners, especially not the one where you are standing. In bells and a motley that itches in 17 places, you're the Jester. Everyone's laughing, except no one is. The king's too drunk to focus, the nobles are staring like owls in hats, and the chamberlain is checking the hourglass like he has somewhere colder to be. You bow anyway. You always bow. That's the job. Perform, deflect, distract, stay alive. Because here in the candle-choked corridors of power, laughter isn't joy, it's currency. And sometimes, it's camouflage. So tonight, we all follow the painted footsteps of the medieval court fool. From his cold breakfasts to his blistering wordplay. From the forced grins to the moments no one clapped. This is not the tale of a man who lived for jokes. It's the tale of someone who survived by them. Someone who wore bells like a soldier wears armor jangling. Ridiculous armor that didn't protect much, but made him visible just enough to not be erased. You might not survive this one. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. You wake up on rushes that weren't yours, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like stew and betrayal. The blanket wasn't yours either. You borrowed it from the falconer last night after drinking too much cider and telling a joke about the Duke's fourth chin. You meant third chin. It was a long day. It was a moment, just one, where your eyes flick open and you wonder where you are. You see a wooden ceiling beam with a crack that looks like a duck. You hear someone softly snoring. You taste regret and something vaguely turnipy. And then it comes back to you. You're the Jester. You're always the Jester, even asleep. The fire's out, of course. The hearth gave up sometime after midnight. It usually does. You rub your arms, which are dressed in yesterday's bells. They jingle when you move softly, like a sarcastic choir of mice, reminding you that your life has no mute button. Sit up. You hit your head on the low beam. It's always there. It always wins. This is the 4th morning in a row. You've tried to stand up in a room that was in built for standing. That's part of being a Jester. You get invited everywhere and belong nowhere. You eat with the nobles, sleep near the scullery, and exist somewhere between amusement and accident. Breakfast? No, not yet. The cook doesn't like you. You made a joke last week about her eyebrows looking like angry caterpillars. It wasn't even a good joke. Just the truth in rhyme. But now she gives you broth that tastes like foot and bread that could deflect arrows. You used to have teeth for biting. Now you have teeth for regretting. Maybe you'll sneak a leftover apple. No, the page boys took those. Maybe a boiled egg. Gone. There's half a turnip under the table, though. Still warm from someone else's pocket. Luxury. You check your hat. All bells accounted for. You hate the hat. It smells like a wet goat in springtime and makes your head itch like you've angered a barber with a grudge. But it's your uniform, your curse, your charm. Because when you walk into that hall later today, they won't remember your name, just the hat, the bells, the noise you make. And when they laugh, if they laugh, you want to know if it's because you're funny or just because they can. There's no applause in the morning. It's just rushes stuck to your cheek. Yesterday's jokes clinging to your sleeves in the faint. Haunting sound of someone else's dream fading into yours. By midday, you've performed 3 times. Once in the courtyard for a bored stable boy who only half listened while shoveling horse dung. Once in the kitchens to no applause, just soup sloshing and a scowl from the cook. And once, briefly, in the presence of the Lord's 3rd cousin who didn't laugh, but did say, which is either high praise or a prelude to being pelted with stale figs. You'd like to say the audiences are difficult, but the truth is simpler. You're uninterested. You read less of a performer and more of a walking distraction. The human version of shaking keys in front of a crying baby, except the baby is a baron with gout. Your job is to make people laugh, but you're not allowed to be too funny. Not that funny. You can mock the king's enemies, you can tease the weather, you can even make jokes about the steward's eyebrows once, but stray too close to the truth, and suddenly, you're not clever. You're insubordinate. And insubordination ends with silence. permanent silence. The kind where your hat is left on a peg for 3 weeks before anyone asks where you went. Today, you make a joke about taxes. It's just a light jab, really. Something about the treasury's lock being tighter than the Lord's codpiece. One squire snorts. Everyone else stares. The silence thickens like bad stew. Someone clears their throat. You laugh loudly, as if to say, "See, I'm ridiculous. It's just noise, not meaning, not threat." The steward doesn't smile, just notes something in a little ledger. You've seen that ledger before. It's not full of jokes. You dance a bit. It helps when the mood falters. Not because your dancing is good, but because you look foolish doing it. Your shoes are too big on purpose. Your bells clanged like panicked insects. You slip once on a rush mat, and someone finally chuckles. Not because you're funny, but because pain is universally funny when it isn't happening to you. You bow, always bow. There's a dog in the corner, licking something unidentifiable. You consider joining it. It's the only creature who seems honestly amused. And then there's the worst part. Someone repeats one of your jokes, badly, and the room roars. You said it first. You said it better. But you're not a noble. You're just the echo that came before the laughter. So you bow again. You always bow. And when someone calls for the fool, you go. Because in this court, the jokes are mandatory. But the laughs, they're optional. You walk into the great hall and it falls silent. Not out of respect, but calculation. You're not important, but you are present. You're not powerful, but you might accidentally say something worth remembering. And that's the danger, isn't it? You talk too much, say too little, and still somehow say the wrong thing. They all look at you. It's not the way you'd look at a friend, or even a good chair. More like a rat in a very colorful vest. You smile, of course. That's your shield. A wide, cheek-cramping thing that lives on your face like moss on a damp log. You make your way past the long tables. Roasted meat, burnt onions, and old wine form a scent that could knock over a mule. Someone throws a chicken bone. You catch it, bow, and pretend it's a scepter. That gets a laugh. 1, maybe 2. No one ever asks you how you're feeling. No one asks if you slept, if your cough is getting worse, if the bruise from yesterday's tumble is healing, or if you're limping because of the cracked floorboard in the steward's chamber. Because you don't limp, you dance, you don't cough, you do impressions, they all see you. But only as a sound. You offer a pun, something about the Queen's falconer and his unfortunate resemblance to a roast goose. It's clever, timed well, but it sails over the heads of the table like a bat with a purpose. No one laughs. Someone squints. A noblewoman sniffs as if the joke offended her perfume. You smile again. It's cracking now. You haven't eaten today? Not really. Few crumbs from a plate no one claimed. Some wine watered down until it cried. There's a child at the end of the table who loves you. She laughs at everything. You stick out your tongue. She howls with joy. Mother hushes, her eyes narrowing. The child shrinks, and so do you. You juggle, as stones, because no one would trust you with fruit. One hits your nose. Laughter, at last. Not your best trick, but always the most reliable. And when you drop them, all 3, you let them scatter across the flagstones like promises you never made. Because here, in this hall full of fur-lined robes and empty ears, being seen is part of the job, but being heard has never been in the contract. They don't know where to seat you. Not because you renew. You've been here longer than some of the lords, but because you don't belong anywhere. You're not family, you're not staff, you're not nobility, you're not nothing, you're something in between. Like a stain they can wash out, but have learned to pretend is part of the pattern. So you hover. Dinner is being served. Boar leeks. Something that once dreamed of being soup. The smell is glorious. The kind of rich, meaty scent that feels like it could feed you through your nose alone. But you don't sit. No one invites you. You know better than to assume. You lean against the pillar. Same one every night. It's chipped at knee height from the time you fell into it, pretending to be the bishop's horse. Everyone laughed. You couldn't breathe for 20 seconds. A solid performance. One of the maids brings a plate to the corner table. It's for the guards, but you eye it like a crow watching unattended bread. Maybe they'll share. Maybe they won't. Last time you got a crust. The time before, a warning. You're not paid in coins. You're paid in privileges. Standing near warmth, eating scraps, and occasionally being allowed to speak without punishment. You live in the empty spaces of the castle, under stairs beside kitchens. In the long breath between someone's command and someone else's obedience, you watch the nobles eat. The way they complain about tenderness, while you chew boiled barley so tough it could spark a fire if rubbed too hard.
I won.
Man spits out a plum because it has a blemish. You once ate an entire pear with a wasp inside and called it tangy. The musicians begin. A lute, a drum, a man who thinks he can sing. You join in briefly. A silly face, a fake dance, until you're waved away. Not because you were bad, but because you interrupted a joke from someone more important. Later, you'll be asked to entertain again. Not now. Now is for watching, for waiting, for being available but not visible, funny but not loud, human but not inconvenient. You wonder, sometimes, what would happen if you just walked out, left the bells behind, dropped the motley, and became invisible on purpose. But then, who would notice? Exactly. There's a game the nobles play. It doesn't have a name, but you know it well. It begins with a question no one should ask, followed by a command no one should give, and ends with you on the floor holding a vegetable and pretending it's a foreign diplomat. Do the one about the bishop and the sheep, someone says. You hesitate. It's a bad joke. It's not because it isn't funny, it's too funny. The bishop's nephew is at the table tonight. He's the sort who considers sneezing out of turn a personal insult. But they're all watching. You smile. You always smile. You perform it half-heartedly, hoping they'll interrupt. They don't. You get through it. One person laughs. Someone else coughs. The bishop's nephew does neither. Just tilts his goblet and raises one eyebrow with the speed of an executioner, unsheathing a sword. You know that eyebrow. It's filed under consequences. But they're not done. They never are. They make you sing, not a song. Your opinions sung like ballads. They ask what you think of the king's new decree, the steward's fashion, the taste of last night's soup. All loaded questions. Traps. Each one tied with a ribbon and dipped in poison. You answer with riddles, jokes that loop like a tired ox. Say nothing, mean less, perform more. Because when you're the punchline, you don't get to leave the joke. They call you over. The young lord, the one who drinks like the wine, owes him money, wants to test your balance. He throws a silver coin on the floor. Fetch. The others laugh. You do it, not because you want to, but because not doing it means this turns from joke to insult, and insult becomes treason if anyone's bored enough. You drop to one knee. Pick up the coin, hand it back with a grin. My lord, your generosity is weighty. Eddie, they laugh again. Not at the line. At you. Because there's nothing funnier than a man performing dignity on his knees. Later, when the candles drip low and the hall empties like a wine cup in winter, you'll still be here. Picking up scraps, replaying conversations, wondering if your phrasing bought you another day. There is no curtain call, just quiet, and your own voice echoing the jokes no one really heard. You wake up sick, not poetically sick, not delicately coughing into a handkerchief like a noblewoman in a tragic romance. No, you're sweating through your tunic. Your throat feels like it's been scoured with hedge trimmings, and your nose is doing an impression of a medieval ale tap. Constant, drippy, and slightly shameful. But there are no sick days for jesters. You, Dante, get to wrap yourself in a blanket and watch the world pass by from the corner of the hearth. If you're quiet, you're replaced. If you're slow, you're forgotten. You stop joking, you stop existing. So you go. You dress slowly. The bells jingle with every motion, reminding the mice under your bed that breakfast is coming, and it's shaped like your foot. Your motley smells worse than usual. Part illness, part laundry neglect, part something that might be soup, or was soup. 3 weeks ago, the hall is already busy. Nobles complaining, servants dodging them. You're supposed to perform before the midday meal. Light entertainment, they say. Something to distract from the smell of overboiled cabbage and political anxiety. You start with a funny walk. Your knees aren't convinced. You follow with a song. Your voice cracks halfway through and someone snorts. Not with joy, it's contempt. You make a joke about Leech as a classic, always a crowd pleaser. No one laughs. It's possibly because the Chancellor's wife is currently being bled in the adjacent chamber and the timing, as they say, is unfortunate. Someone notices you're sweating. The Lord's niece pinches her nose. Is he contagious? She whispers, as if you're a pot of bad stew. You try to smile. Your teeth hurt. You finish your set early. No one notices. You sit on a bench near the kitchens and sip water that tastes faintly of onions and possibly regret. Your hands are shaking. You think about asking for a rest day. Then you remember what happened to the last Jester, who got too quiet. He didn't leave. He faded. One day no one called for him. 2 days later, his room had a new broom in it, and someone else wearing his bells. So you cough into your sleeve, rub your face, and rehearse a joke about the bishop's wig. Even though you know it won't land. Because you can't stop. Not because you're loved, but because you're tolerated. Just loudly enough to be needed, and just quietly enough to be forgotten. There's a fire in the castle courtyard today. Not a cheerful one. Not the gather round and roast a turnip kind. Something actually caught, a hay cart. Possibly a stable. Possibly someone's patience. You try to look concerned. You are concerned. But you don't get to be concerned. That's not your role. Your job is to lighten the moment. Make a rhyme. Spin a joke. Find the funny in the smoke and shouting. So you do. What's red, smoky, and nobly flammable, you call out. A few nervous chuckles. One glare. If someone mutters your name like it's the answer to a riddle about bad timing. Night storms past you, armor clanking like an angry pot cupboard. He's angry. At the fire. At the weather. At someone else entirely. You flinch. He doesn't look. You're not real enough to hit. Not yet. You trail behind the crowd. Not because you're helpful, but because they'll expect you to narrate it later. Put a punchline on something that didn't feel funny at all. They don't let you be solemn, not even when it's justified. If you stop smiling, they worry. If you stop talking, they whisper. If you seem sad, they get uncomfortable. Because if the jester's unhappy, what does that say about the rest of them? Child was hurt in the chaos. Not badly, but enough. You see her being carried inside? You know her name? You once taught her to juggle apples. Badly, but with enthusiasm. You want to ask if she's all right, but your mouth opens. And instead, you say something about roasted pears. You hate yourself for it. They laugh. You bow. There's a quiet moment later in the kitchen corridor. You sit with your back against the wall, beside a sack of onions and the distinct smell of singed wool. You close your eyes, just for a second. The steward finds you. There's unrest, he says. We need lightness. You'll perform tonight. You nod. Because what else is there to do? Wipe your face, straighten your bells, and rehearse a line about fire being nature's way of reorganizing property. It's not funny, but you'll say it anyway. Because you, the only one who does in tea, get to be serious, even when everything else is burning. It happens like this. Someone drinks too much. A noble a knight, a cousin of a bishop who believes his cloak makes him important. He wobbles over, wine's licked and whispering, and suddenly you're the confessional booth with bells. You don't ask for it. You never do. But they tell you anyway. Scandals, betrayals, things involving chambermaids and forged signatures and a borrowed dagger that was never meant to return. And why? Because they assume you're harmless. Because a jester's words are noise. Tolerated, giggled at, but never remembered. You are where secrets go to ferment. Tonight, it's Lord Malric. He's red in the face, breath like spoiled cider, hands trembling with importance. He slaps your back too hard, and drapes an arm around your shoulder like a curtain of sweaty velvet. I'm thinking of rebellion, he slurs. You blink. That's not a joke, not even a bad one. You consider giggling, turning it into a pun about revolting meals and overly crisp potatoes, but you just nod, then immediately wish you hadn't. You're funny, he says. No one listens to you, and then he stumbles off, knocking over a pitcher that wasn't his. He'll forget it. You won't. You return to the corner, the shadows, the place between furniture and memory. You sip thin ale. Your hands feel colder than your cup, and now you carry that secret. It buzzes behind your eyes. You think about telling someone, but who? The steward. He'd ask why you were speaking with Lord Malric, the guards. They'd laugh and say jesters aren't reliable. And besides, if anything did happen, guess who'd be called in for a quiet little questioning? Do you rehearse your distraction lines? Jokes about Malric's beard, about his boots, about the time he confused a chamber pot for a goblet at midsummer. You'll build a wall of absurdity around him, not to protect him, but to protect you, because you're the vault no one locks. The record no one acknowledges. You hear everything. You say nothing. If you slip, even once, the penalty won't be silence. It'll be someone else wearing your bells by next week. That's the real joke. You know too much. But your mouth only opens for laughter. You're there in every painting. Not at the center, never at the center, but in the margins. Behind a pillar, near the dog. Half visible, behind the feathered hat of someone more important. Your likeness is captured, sort of though your nose looks wrong, and your bells are too tidy. But no one painted your name. That's how it always is. At banquets, they place you near the music, but not with the musicians. At processions, you walk behind the torchbearers, but ahead of the manure cart. During ceremonies, you're the color, the moving noise, the polite distraction. You're always visible, never considered. Today, they dress you up for the feast. A slightly cleaner version of the same outfit. By cleaner, we mean it has fewer grease spots and slightly less hay in the hem. The bells are freshly fastened, the hat pressed into reluctant shape. You're instructed to look presentable, which is rich. Coming from a man whose teeth resemble a crumbling chapel, you parade through the hall. They cheer. Not for you specifically, but for the fact that you're not as important as they are. A noblewoman waves you over. You hope she wants a joke? Instead, she wants you to hold her goblet while she adjusts her sleeves. You do. She doesn't thank you. She doesn't look at you. Later, you perform. A short tale about a merchant, a goose, and a lawsuit involving soup. It lands. They laugh. You glow briefly. But when the steward retells the same story 2 hours later badly, they laugh even harder. You sit beside the dais when the feast drags on. Your job is to smile, nod, and provide the occasional jingle of movement so no one notices how quiet things have gotten. You are ambiance, like candles, but with knees. No one asks if your legs hurt. They do. No one offers you a cushion. You're sitting on a bench that's been arguing with your spine for an hour. And when the feast ends, the table's clear and the musicians vanish like fog, you remain, wiping down. A joke no one claimed, brushing crumbs off your sleeves, trying to remember when your name last mattered more than your costume. When you die, and you will, someday, just like everyone else who ever wore too many colors and spoke too much truth, no one will write your name in the annals. There will be no statues, no psalms. Maybe, if you're lucky, someone will misquote you in a joke 2 generations later and attribute it to a drunk monk. That's your legacy. Because jesters aren't remembered, not properly. They're retold, rewritten, reduced. You were there when the prince cried, when the queen broke her goblet, and the king couldn't sleep and needed someone to mock the stars for being too bright. But no one will say that. They'll say you danced. Your life is a trail of laughter that doesn't lead anywhere. Today, they mention the old fool. That's you, though they don't use your name. Just the last one. As if you were a bench or a cup or a winter that happened to be particularly long. They laugh about your fall down the cellar stairs. How you squealed like a pig. You remember breaking 2 ribs. They remember the noise. You try to laugh along. Your ribs still ache in cold weather. You once saved a lord from drinking poisoned wine, made a joke about his breath being flammable, knocked the goblet from his hand. Everyone laughed, even the steward. Then they forgot. The Lord never thanked you. The cook got blamed. That same Lord now praises the new Jester, a boy with fresh teeth and unbroken knees. He juggles 5 apples. You could do 6, but no one asks. Your bed is in the storage loft now. Next to barrels of pickled herring and a spinning wheel missing 1 leg. Your blanket doesn't cover your feet. The draft does. The mice are bolder. You write jokes on bits of parchment and tuck them between the floorboards. Not because anyone will find them, but because you retrying to exist outside the echo of laughter. To leave something behind that E&T, just a noise. But the truth is this. No one keeps the laughter. Just the silence afterward. And someday, another jester will stand where you stood, wear what you wore, and fall the same way. And they'll laugh again. You don't plan to be a court jester. No one does. It's not a job you dream of as a child. Sitting by the fire, watching the bread turn black on one side and raw on the other. You don't think, yes, someday I'll wear bells on my elbows and risk execution by pun. But life, like soup in a cracked pot, finds its own strange path to the floor. So when you, or rather Will Sommers, arrive at Henry VIII's court in 1525. You do it the usual way, accidentally, uncomfortably, and hungry. The legend says you were brought in by a noble, maybe Sir Nicholas Carew, someone who thought your quick wit and limp were funny, or perhaps distracting, or perhaps just convenient. There was a vacancy. It's probably not because someone retired. And just like that, you're there. The court is bigger than anything you've known. It's bigger than your hometown, bigger than the barn where you once slept inside a turnip sack to avoid frostbite. The walls glitter, not just from jewels, but from people. Everyone polished, powdered again. And they're all dangerous. You don't understand the game yet. You think it's about entertainment? About jokes. It isn't. It's about walking the length of a sword without knowing where the point is. Henry smiles at you. That's terrifying, because he's not smiling with you. He's smiling at you, like a cat watches a clever mouse. Interested, amused, and possibly considering dinner, you tell a joke, something about monks and fish and the queen's love of eels. They laugh. Not just Henry, the courtiers, the ones who were whispering earlier. Now they look at you, like maybe you're useful. And that's worse. You're dressed in borrowed motley. It's too short in the sleeves, too long in the legs. Right. Bells like dead cicadas hanging from frayed velvet. Your shoes pinch. Ow. Your tongue is dry. Your future is now tied to a king whose moods swing faster than a drunk fencing with a candle. But you survive. For today and tomorrow. Maybe again. Because Will Sommers, unlike most jesters, learns quickly. You're not here to be funny. You're here to be safe. And if that means being funny, well, then you better get better at it fast. The first time, Henry laughs, really laughs. It feels like someone kicked open a furnace. You've made other men laugh before. Merchants, bishops, drunken blacksmiths with broken thumbs. But this is different. When Henry laughs, it's the kind of sound that makes the entire room laugh too. Not because the joke is good, but because no one wants to be the only one not laughing. It spreads, like panic, or a yawn with teeth. He said something small, something about French wine tasting like bishop's bathwater. Nothing brilliant, but the timing was right. Henry had just returned from a meeting. Someone had made him angry. Your words hit the air just as his patience cracked, and he roared. And now everyone knows. The king finds you amusing. This is both the best and worst thing that's ever happened to you. Best, because you won't be whipped today. You might even eat something with spice in it. Worst, because now you're expected to be funny, and not in the safe way, in the dangerous way, in the mock the ambassador way, in the joke about Parliament and live way, in the say what no one else dares and still get invited back way. You're not a jester now. You're a whetstone for royal boredom. Henry calls for you often, at breakfast, during hunts, late at night when the court is quiet, but the king's mind isn't. You become part of the furniture. A sharp-tongued chair with bells and too many stories. He asks what you think about his advisors. You answer carefully, with metaphors. A flock of geese who believe they are lions. He laughs. You don't sleep that night. You think about whether any of those geese heard you. He asks what you think of his latest wife. You say she's like a good pastry, warm, flaky, and everyone wants a bite. He laughs too hard. Someone drops a fork. You bow. Then excuse yourself before someone can escort you to the cellar. The truth is, when the king likes you, you are safe, until he doesn't. And that line is thinner than a page in a book you're not allowed to read. Still, for now, he's laughing. So you keep talking. And you keep hoping the next joke isn't the one that kills you. There's a special kind of laughing that happens at court. It's the kind where your mouth smiles and your eyes stay alert, sharp, scanning, calculating how close the knife is to your back, and whether it's ceremonial or personal. You learn it quickly, because Henry laughs loud, but he watches louder. Every time you make a joke, he studies your face like a butcher eyes a pig, half admiring, avdash measuring. You joke about Cardinal Wolsey once, just once, a little line about red hats and redder debts. Gets a chuckle. 2 days later, Wolsey's mood changes. The kitchens accidentally send you spoiled meat. The laundry forgets your tunic. The guards don't see you in the court. Doors shut. You learn. You laugh with your eyes open, and you start collecting knowledge like other men collect debts. Who's angry? Who is smiling too much? Who's missing from dinner? Who's suddenly polite? You know the queen's favorite wine? The ambassador's real accent, in which noble is pretending his limp is from battle and not gout. But you don't use it. Not unless you have to, because every truth you speak is a coin tossed into a very old well. Maybe it echoes, maybe it drowns. Henry begins to trust you, or says he does, which is worse. Only Will tells me the truth, he says once, laughing. But truth, in this room, is just another form of entertainment. Something to be admired briefly, then shoved under a cushion. You never correct him. He asks for your company during quiet evenings. After feasts, when his eyes are bloodshot from wine and worry. He talks. You listen. He says things you pretend not to hear. You nod in all the right places. You laugh when he's funny. Laugh louder when he's not. Because there's a rhythm to surviving here. Predict, perform, vanish, like a magician. Without sleeves or a target in motion. Your eyes never rest. Not even when you're smiling. And when they ask what makes a great jester, you don't say wit, you say vision. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk history will remember Henry. Not kindly, but loudly. His wives, his wars, his waistline, all get their chapters. But you're the background cough. The smile behind the curtain. The jingle that tells you something uncomfortable is about to be said, and then politely ignored. You're always there, but not in it. At court, you attend everything. The coronations, the christenings, the funerals. You're at the feasts, the parades, the executions with decorative banners. You're part of every scene and none of them. When Bullen first arrives, you see it in the way Henry blinks. Too long, too hard. You notice the tension in the queen's smile. You make a joke about French lace and short tempers. It earns a laugh. It buys you another day, but when the story gets written down later, they'll note the tapestry colors, the wine vintages, the nobility in attendance. No mention of you, though you were the one who diffused the moment when the Spanish ambassador choked on a walnut and nearly caused a war. You get very good at exiting quietly once Henry asks, "What do you think of history?" You reply, "It's a table full of names, and I carry the dishes." He chuckles, then uses it at dinner, claiming he made it up. Everyone claps. You bowed another time. You make a pun about Cromwell's haircut. It lands. Barely. The next morning, your bed is missing its blanket. The blanket returns 3 days later, smelling like cabbage and warning. There's a portrait being painted, a grand one. Henry seated, proud, surrounded by his court. Asked to stand in. Not to be painted, just to hold the bishop's dog so it doesn't fidget. You do, for 3 hours. The dog bites you twice, you're not in the painting, you learn to nod at moments that will become history, and then step aside before the ink dries. Because in the story, someone has to be invisible, and you're quite good at it. Asterisk, 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 it starts with a whisper, then two, then a sudden interest in corridors and side eyes. You know the signs. A queen is falling out of favor. Again, this time it's an I don't. One day she's radiant. The next, she's sharp-tongued. Then ambitious. And in court, ambitious means someone we're now allowed to dislike. You've seen it before, you'll see it again. Queens are like candles, celebrated when lit, forgotten when snuffed, and rarely missed when replaced. But when a queen begins to teeter, you are summoned. Not because you can stop it, but because someone needs to keep everyone smiling while the wheels underneath start to grind bones into paperwork. You're called in during dinner, and is there, pale, alert, polite, in the way a hunted animal is polite? Henry is quiet. He eats slowly. It's never a good sign. You're asked to tell a story. You do something absurd about a goose and a misdelivered love letter. It gets a laugh. It even smiles, and that's the danger. If she looks too relaxed, they say she doesn't care. If she frowns, she's bitter. If she laughs, she's mocking. You are the buffer. The jester-shaped fog that makes tension less sharp. After dessert, stewed pears, served too cold. Henry demands a pun. You fumble. You offer something weak about pears and pears. He chuckles. Not because it's clever, it's because it distracts. From what he's already decided, that night, you hear footsteps in the hall. Quiet ones. Official ones. You stay very still in your straw-filled bed, pretending to sleep while decisions move past your door like ghosts with deadlines. You think of Anne's face, the way she smiled too carefully, the way she touched her cup without drinking. The next day, you're told she's unwell. That's the word they use. You nod at breakfast. Henry asks for a riddle. You give him one about a ship that sails without. A sail and sinks when it's remembered. He laughs. Then forgets you never say her name again. Not out loud, but sometimes you whisper it when you're alone, just to remind yourself that once someone smiled at your joke and meant it. Asterisk, 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 as the years wear on. Henry gets larger in presence, in temper, in actual physical mass. His steps grow slower, but louder. His sighs turn into statements. His smiles become rarer and more expensive. You notice the shift before others admit it. His eyes narrow more often. His mood sours faster. His appetite grows stranger, less for food, more for flattery. His back aches, his leg bleeds, and yet no one dares limp around him. But you still have to dance. Even when the floor creaks under the weight of too many expectations, the joke used to be the spark in the room. Now it's the kindling. It has to burn, and you have to light it. You joke about his shoes. He laughs. You joke about his waistline. He glares. The difference is 3 seconds and 2 courtiers leaving the room on sudden business. You adapt. You make the joke smaller, softer, more self-deprecating. You play the fool who doesn't know he's treading on cracked ice, but you know. Oh, you know. Every syllable is tested. Every pause is a risk. Once you mention the kings. Hunt. Just to quip something about boars running from his dinner breath. He laughs loudly, slaps the table, and 2 days later your room is moved. Closer to the stables. The message is clear. You accept it. Henry still asks for you, but less often. Not because he dislikes you, but because he dislikes everything. A little more now. The throne creaks louder when he sits. What? The courtiers flatter harder. The court laughs quicker and stops faster. You begin to wonder if the crown is crushing him from the inside. And if so, what's crushing you? The bells on your cap don't ring like they used to. One is bent, another is rusted. Keep meaning to fix them. But then another evening arrives. Another request, another chance to speak lightly and step carefully, because now every joke is a negotiation, every smile is an apology, and every laugh is a thread holding your head just a little higher than the floor. There's a reason you're kept so close to the king. It's not the jokes, not really. It's because you're the one person allowed to say what everyone else is thinking, but only if you say it slant, wrapped in nonsense, dipped in, rhyme and served with a wiggle of the hips. Your mirror cracked, bent, occasionally smudged, but still a mirror. Henry uses you that way, not consciously, not kindly, but because even kings need to glimpse themselves, sometimes, through someone who can't strike them down. So you do it carefully, you hint that. Parliament is behaving like a flock of squirrels in borrowed robes. You imply that one advisor smells of fear and lavender. You joke that the treasury is like a monk's stomach, always grumbling and never full. And everyone laughs, nervously, because the jokes are about someone but could just as easily be about them. You become an oracle with jester bells, a weather vane for royal fury. If the king laughs, others laugh. If the king frowns, you feel the temperature in the room drop like a stone in soup. There's a moment once when Henry asks if he's loved. He asks casually, the way you'd ask about the weather before a funeral. You say, only fools love their king honestly. Lucky you, you keep one close. He laughs. A full, honest laugh, then says nothing. For a long time, you feel the weight of that silence. That night, the steward brings you wine you didn't ask for. Good wine. That's not a gift. That's a message. You were noticed. Again, because even when they pretend you're just a fool, they're listening. And that's the trap. You get used to being clever. It's used to being heard, even if no one says so. You begin to forget that. You're still a tool. A prop. A performance with feet. A mirror is useful, till it reflects the wrong thing. Then it's just something to cover with a cloth. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk you used to bounce. Now you shuffle. The bells on your ankles don't jingle. They clunk. One's fallen off, and no one's bothered to sew it back. Not even you. Your laugh is still there, technically, but it creaks, like a door that opens once a week, and only because it must. You used to be the youngest person in the room, then the cleverest. Now you're just the one who hasn't died. Yet, you sit more than you stand more than you speak. You speak less than you once did, not out of wisdom, but out of caution. The court has changed. The laughter is thinner, the eyes sharper, the reward smaller, the risks the same. Henry is older too, bigger, quieter, redder in the face. The jesting has become ritual, a shared script between two men who once played, and now perform. He calls for you like one might call for a familiar old chair, out of habit, comfort, and the knowledge that it won't ask questions. You make a joke about time. Something light, something about clocks, having ulcers and sundials sulking. He laughs. It echoes around the room and dies halfway to the ceiling. Someone new arrives at court. Another fool. Young, flexible, loud. His shoes don't pinch yet. His voice rings clear. He juggles. Badly, but they clap anyway. Shh. You're asked to share the stage, which is a polite way of saying, move aside. You nod. You applaud. You tell him to watch for the steward's mood and never joke about gout. He thanks you. He means it. You wish he wouldn't. In private, Henry still calls for you. Some nights he asks for a story from the old days. You tell it slowly, like stepping over ice, has thinned. He smiles, his eyes close. You don't. Speak of tomorrow? You return to your room? The rushes are thinner. The blanket is older. The windows still won't shut properly. You fix the corner with a spoon and a broken button. It's always like that. You're still here, but your jokes are quieter now. Not because they're worse, but because there are fewer people left who remember how loud they used to be. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk by now. The faces have changed. The halls echo with names you barely recognize, and titles that used to belong to different men, thinner men, louder men. Men who laughed at your jokes and then disappeared like spilled wine under the rushes. You stay, because you've outlasted. 5 queens, 3 advisors, 2 jesters, and more guards than you can count. You don't even try to count them anymore. You just nod when they walk past and they nod back, thinking perhaps you're just part of the furniture, which, in a way, you are the slightly chipped chair in the corner that no one throws out because it still holds weight. You don't leave because leaving is never offered, but you don't stay because it's pleasant. You stay because that's what you do. Henry grows heavier, his anger sharper. His memory, ... BLURRIER. He asks you, one evening, whether Anne is coming to supper. You don't say which Anne, you just shake your head gently and offer a pun about invisible guests and overcooked lamb. He chuckles, then forgets why he laughed. You perform less. Now. Not because they don't want jokes, but because they want different jokes. Younger jokes. Louder ones. Jokes that come with backflips and exaggerated voices. You don't backflip. You barely bend. Your knees sound like old wood furniture being rearranged, but when there's a moment of silence, no one can bear. They still call for you. You enter slowly. You speak softly. Yes. You say something about ducks in council robes and potatoes that write poetry. It doesn't make sense. They laugh because you remind them of something safer, a time before so many heads rolled, when jesters juggled instead of vanished. At night, the castle feels quieter. You remember the echoes of footsteps now long gone. You sit in your room. Sharpen your quill on the stone floor and copy old riddles onto old parchment with older ink, not for anyone to read. Just to see the words exist, you've outlasted the court, and yet somehow you never arrived. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It happens quietly, which is strange for a man like Henry. No trumpets, no lightning. Just stillness. A large man, a large bed, and a room full of things that can't be taken with him. Robes, rings, regrets. You aren't there when he dies. You're outside the chamber, sitting on a bench that's never been comfortable. Watching the corridor like it might try to escape, a servant runs past, pale. A priest enters. No one speaks your name, but you know what's happened.
Joking?
Feel the absence before it's official. You think, that's it? You think, now I vanish too? But you don't. You're asked to appear the next day, not to jest, just to be seen. You stand at the edge of the morning hall, in faded motley bells. Muted by cloth, hands folded like a question with no punctuation. You say nothing. No one asks you to. People glance your way. Briefly, like they're trying to remember if you're still real. Some nod. One noble woman weeps into a handkerchief she's held in 4 different courts. A boy looks at you and whispers, "Is that the fool?" His tutor hushes him, but doesn't answer. Later, in your room, you unwrap the small bundle of belongings you've kept tucked under a loose floorboard. A note Henry once scribbled on the back of a meat order. "Will make me laugh today, or I'll throw a bishop," a carved wooden duck, and a piece of blue ribbon you found under the Queen's table once. You look at them, then at the wall, then at nothing. You think about all the things you've said that were almost true, the laughter you bought with careful lies, the silence you survived. In between, you practice a smile in the mirror, not because you need it, but because you might again. A new king means a new court, new eyes, new dangers. Not because you're funny, it's because you're still standing. When the knock comes soft, hesitant. You already know what they'll say. They want you to perform. So you nod and tie the bells back onto your sleeve. They don't ring, but they remember how. The motley doesn't choose you, someone else does. Usually a steward with a poor sense of color and an excellent sense of humiliation. Your costume arrives in a bundle. It smells like mildew, cabbage water, and long-forgotten dignity. Lift it piece by piece and try to decide which part is the most insulting. The yellow hose, the green tunic, or the hat that seems to have sprouted horns without asking permission. There are bells on everything. Tiny metal announcements that jingle every time you move, breathe, blink too hard. You walk into a room and you're already speaking, not with words, but with sound. Chorus of tinsel-colored shame. The boots don't match. The sleeves are too short. There's a hole in the armpit that's been sewn shut with someone else's hair. You're fairly certain it itches. It all itches. You think maybe you can tailor it a little. Tuck here, loosen there. You ask for a needle. The laundress looks at you like you've asked for the crown jewels, then hands you one that bends immediately and whispers, "Best not." You take the hint, dressing like a joke. You realize, comes with a rule. You must never look like you're trying not to. You perform better when they laugh at you before you speak. The motley becomes part of the act, the bright confusion that makes your truth easier to swallow, like putting poison in a honey cake. Or sarcasm in a lullaby you hear a noble say once, "He's like a child's drawing of a knight." They laugh, so do you. But later you stare at your reflection in a silver plate and wonder if there's anything under all this color that hasn't faded. The costume hangs on you like a punishment, but taking it off is worse. When you undress at night, you feel invisible, too quiet, too real. So you keep the bells on your wrist, even when you sleep. Just in case someone forgets what you are, because if they stop laughing, they might start thinking, and thinking has never been safe. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You put it on slowly. The mask. It's not a real one, not always, though sometimes they do hand you one made of paper match and painted like a goose that's seen things. But most of the time, the mask isn't something you can hold. It's the grin, the hunch, tilted head. The voice an octave higher than yours, tinged with too much cheer, like honey gone slightly sour. They want the jester, not the man. The noise, not the meaning. The flavor, not the substance. So you give it to them, you tell jokes about the kitchen's rats, but not about the steward's secret hoard of meat. You joke about bad ale, but not about why the brewer suddenly disappeared. You make fun of everyone except the one who signs the execution orders. The mask protects you, yes, but it also traps you, because now they don't believe you. When you're not performing, you try to speak plainly once, during a stormy afternoon when the king's mood is low and the hall feels like it's waiting to crack. You say something simple, honest, about fear, about change, about how the people outside the castle are hungry. The room goes quiet. Then someone laughs, too loudly, and says, "Oh, Will," always with the grim humor. You nod, you bow. You put the mask back on. You become the joke even when you're not trying to be. Especially then. If you ever say something too raw, too real, they assume you're being clever. It's the only way they know how to process. Truth as an accidental riddle told by a man in bells, so you lean into it. You say things with 3 meanings, and let them choose the one that hurts least. You wrap warnings in rhymes, insults in lullabies, prophecies in fart jokes. They call it wit. You call it survival. Because the moment they see your real face tired, uneven, not smiling, they'll feel cheated. They'll remember you're a person. And that's dangerous. The mask is for them, but now it fits too well. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. There's a pouch in your quarters.
Yours.
It jingles when you shake it, not from coins, but from buttons, old bones, and the single bent token you were once paid for making the queen's aunt laugh until she hiccuped. You don't make much money. No one expects you to ask. You're given food sometimes. A bed, sort of. A place in court, allegedly, and laughter. Always laughter. That's your real wage. They laugh, so you're fed. They laugh, so you're safe. They laugh, and so you exist. But when you go to the baker and try to trade a joke for a roll, he stares at you like you've offered him a dead moth. You chuckle, offer a riddle. He shrugs. You walk away hungrier than when you arrived, with your dignity slightly more wrinkled than your tunic. The steward reminds you that your position is privileged. You get wine at feast days, leftovers from the kitchen, sometimes even soup, with identifiable ingredients, but you notice that others, the ones who sweep the halls and sharpen the knives, have shoes that don't leak. That's a luxury beyond your station. You once tried to patch yours with pig fat. It worked until it didn't, and now your left boot smells like rainy regret. You joke about it in the hall. They laugh. And the Duke says, "What a delightful creature," and tosses a chicken bone in your direction. You bow. You keep the bone. Later, you scrape it clean and save the marrow for broth. Sometimes the queen's handmaid slips you bread. She doesn't smile when she does it. She just mutters, "Don't say anything." You never do. There's a purse kept by the treasurer labeled entertainment. You're not sure if it includes you. You once checked. It didn't. You keep a tally in your head of every laugh you've earned. Try to believe it counts for something. Maybe it does, but you're not full. You're just funny. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You slip through court like a rumor in boots. They know your face. Every lord, every lady, every scribe with ink on his fingers. They wave at you, nod at you, laugh at you, but never invite you. You're part of every conversation, and none of them. You are known, but never included, like the smell of soup. In the corridor acknowledged, but not served. They expect you to know everything. Who's fallen from grace? Who's suddenly risen? Who insulted whom in the garden? And who is pretending they didn't? You do know, of course. You see more than most. You're a spider with bells, tolerated as long as you don't crawl. It's too far across the tapestry. Someone calls you over at a banquet. You think it's for wine? It's not. It's for gossip. They want you to confirm that Lord Fenwick's limp is from guilt, not gout. You offer a pun about dancing with consequences. They laugh. Lord Fenwick does not. Later, he bumps into you. With intent, his ring scrapes your arm. He doesn't apologize. You jingle and bow as if that were your fault. You try not to take sides. That's dangerous. But neutrality has a price. You belong to no one. When fights break out, you're the cushion they all punch. The soft target, the just a fool. A convenient lightning rod in velvet patchwork. The king expects you to know the mood of the court before he does. The queen expects you to avoid her moods entirely. Steward expects you to laugh even when the soup is spoiled in the hallway. It smells like disaster. So you do. You move from chamber to chamber. It's unclaimed. Unwanted in the way a broom is unwanted until the floor is dirty. You nod at servants. They nod back. They know. They're invisible too, just differently. You share a joke with a page. He laughs. Then he sees the noble who pays him and stops. You don't? You keep laughing, because once you stop, they might. Remember you're alone, and that you've always been. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You learn early that not all targets are created equal. You can jest about bishops, cardinals, saints, with questionable biographies, as long as you rhyme, and as long as the king chuckles. Religion is delicate. Satire is safe if you sing it sweetly and blame the rhyme. So you say things like, a monk and a pig walked into a tithe barn, and the court howls. You compare a friar's beard to a hedge that's eaten too many secrets. You joke that the only thing holier than the abbot is his socks. They love it. They adore it. In fact, because mocking the church makes everyone feel daring, rebellious, in a way that still lets them go to mass after dessert. But mock the cook? That's dangerous. You make a harmless comment once about the soup being thin enough to read through. The kitchen boy goes pale. The steward frowns. The next day, your bread is stale. Your porridge tastes of ash, and your wine has something floating in it that blinks. You try to apologize. The cook offers you a smile as warm as a forgotten cellar. You do not mention the soup again. There's power in food. More than in faith, some days. The bishop may save your soul, but the cook decides if you taste rat or rabbit. You remember this. From then on, you make jokes about the cook's enemies, not the cook. You praise his creative spice techniques. You write an entire limerick about his gravy being bold enough to wake the dead. He hears it. He grunts. Your next meal includes bread that bends only slightly. Lesson learned? You can insult the chancellor's mistress, the knight's horse. It's even the queen's taste in music. But the moment you joke that the roast was dry, you've overstepped. The court is governed by hierarchies. The kitchen is governed by vengeance. You're not afraid of swords. You're afraid of stew. Because a joke can get you out of a beheading, but it won't save you from food that tastes. It's like boiled parchment and smells like punishment. At banquets, your seat is nowhere in particular. You are not placed with the servants. That would be too disrespectful. You are not placed with the nobles. That would be too confusing. Instead, you float. It's like a ghost in Motley, or a chicken leg that no one remembers ordering but everyone passes around. You hover near the musicians, near the fire, near the edge of things. Sometimes you sit, briefly. Then someone gestures and you rise. Always rising, always responding. To the flick of a noble's hand like a trained curtain, they offer you food sometimes. Usually what's left. Bones with suspicious smudges. Bread that bends like regret. A fig that's been handled too many times by fingers too rich to care. You eat anyway. At feast's end, you're still standing. They're slumped in wine dreams and half-remembered stories, but you're cleaning up the laughter. Sweeping it off the floor like dust. You serve the mood of the room. Keep it light. Keep it moving. You're a bell on a hinge. Smile with knees. But no one says thank you. They'll thank the butcher for the roast, the vintner for the wine, the harpist for the tune, but the fool, you're part of the furniture. Praise the fire, not the ashes. That's what you are, the warmth left behind that no one acknowledges. Once, a guest from another court asks where you're supposed to sit. You reply, wherever the wine isn't, and the blame is, and doesn't look at you again. You wear fine colors, but wash them yourself. You entertain kings, but sleep near brooms. You speak across the table, but are not allowed to stay when it's cleared. So you exist in the seam, not quite guest, not quite servant, stitched into the margin, and if the stitching ever tears, you suspect no one will notice. Not until the room goes quiet, and they wonder why no one's laughing. Asterisk, 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 you stand in a room full of men who believe they matter. They wear rings heavy enough to dent cheese and titles long enough to choke a mule. They argue over Latin phrases and the placement of chairs. They debate law like it's philosophy and insult each other with compliments dipped in oil. You Meanwhile, stand in shoes that leak and make jokes about goats. And somehow, your words carry weight not because of authority, but because one expects you to use it. That's your weapon. Surprise. You can say things no one else can, as long as you say them in rhyme. As long as you tilt your head when you say them. As long as you look like you might not understand what you're saying, you'll mention that the tax collector is collecting fear more than silver. The king laughs. The nobles shift. The tax collector sweats. But nothing changes, because you're allowed to say it. You're just not allowed to mean it. If a courtier speaks truth, it's politics. If you do, it's entertainment. Trick. That's the trap. You once suggested, in a song, that maybe war isn't always the best way to prove a point. The chorus included rhyming words like sword and board. Everyone clapped. The army marched anyway. They praise your honesty, then ignore it. They call you brave, then forget what you said. They say, "Oh, Will, what a sharp tongue," and then sharpen their own against duller targets. You joke that the treasury is emptier than the bishop's sermon. They laugh, then raise taxes. You joke that the king's new law will require peasants to breathe only on weekdays. He snorts wine, then signs it anyway, or something close enough so you learn. We wield words like feathers, soft, pretty, easily. Blown away, you make fun of power. But if you ever reached for it, you'd find your hand gone before the laughter stopped. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You think maybe tonight you can rest. There's no feast, no guests. The king is silent. The halls echo only with the sound of guards shifting weight from one foot to the other and the occasional sigh of a candle trying to burn slower. You sit. You let the bells on your sleeves settle into stillness. Then you hear a snicker. Not laughter. Just a snicker. From the shadows, maybe a servant, maybe a page, maybe no one. You sit straighter. Say something mildly absurd about mice forming a theater. Troop, no one replies. But now you're performing again. You hum a nonsense song while walking to the kitchens. You tip your hat to an empty hallway. You bow slightly when the steward passes. Even though he wasn't looking, he nods. Barely, but he saw. That's the thing. Someone always sees, and so the act never ends. You once coughed in the chapel, and 2 nuns laughed. You weren't trying to be funny. But now, every time you walk by, they ask if your lungs have prepared their encore. You once tripped in the snow and turned it into a dance. A servant applauded. You didn't mean to, but now they expect it every winter. You become so used to being... Watch that when you're alone, truly alone. It feels like you're missing something, like a cloak that's gone quiet, or a bell that forgot how to echo. You talk to yourself, in riddles, it's in rhymes, just in case you practice a new joke about ducks and foreign policy while peeling a turnip. You imagine how the court might respond? You bow to the pot, doesn't clap, but you do. Even your dreams are rehearsals now. You wake up mid-punchline, unsure if anyone laughed. You perform in sleep, in stillness, in hunger, because once you start performing, stopping feels like falling. It's like letting the air out of your own shadow, so you keep going. Even when no one is in the room, because you never know when someone might be. Asterisk, 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 madness is a useful cloak. Not thick, not warm, more of a gauze you drape over your shoulders when the wind shifts too suddenly. You're not truly mad, but you. Let them think you might be. It's safer that way. You say things that almost make sense. You talk about fish voting in council meetings, about chairs that whisper at night. You greet the moon as a colleague. They laugh, and they leave you alone. Because madness, unlike mischief, isn't punishable. It's pitiable, charming, sometimes even fashionable. You become court decor, the cracked vase on the mantel. It's too interesting to throw out. Once, a bishop asks if you believe the stars can hear us. You reply, only when we snore in Latin. He writes it down. You never see him again. A lady-in-waiting confesses her husband is cold to her. He suggests she'll feed him cloves and see if he sneezes warmth. She tries it. It doesn't work. Still thanks you. They ask your opinion, then dismiss it because of course you're mad. But you remember everything. Every secret dropped in jest. Every insult disguised as compliment. Every door that opened when someone thought you weren't listening. You're not mad. You're very, very attentive. You talk to geese in the courtyard loudly. You wear your shoes backward once a week. You pretend to argue with your belt, not because you believe these things, but because they do. They say, he's harmless. They say he's soft in the head. They say, better not to provoke him, who knows what he'll do. Exactly. You create a fog, performance within the performance, because in a world where sense can get you executed, nonsense is a shield with bells, and you wield it with. Flair, you once muttered a prophecy during a thunderstorm. Something about a crown made of turnips. A year later, a noble was disgraced, and his estate grew only root. Vegetables for 7 seasons, now they ask you for fortunes, you make them up, but they believe you, because only a madman would speak the truth that plainly. Asterisk, 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 it ends quietly. Not the roll that never ends, the laughter, the audience. One day they just ... stop. Maybe the king is ill. Maybe the court is grieving something unspeakable, like the price of almonds. Maybe no one feels like laughing because the nobles are tired, the servants are jumpy, and someone left a goat in the chapel again. Doesn't matter. They don't laugh. You still bow, because that's what you do. You perform. Whether anyone listens, watches, or cares. You deliver your line about the goose who tried to become a knight. Silence. You mention the riddle about the abbot and the broken bell. Nothing. You pull a face that once made the prince choke on pie. Doesn't look up. You stand there motley. Sharp in the torchlight, bells still jingling from habit, and realize you're clapping into fog, so you bow again. Deeper, slower, as if the silence is applause. You once thought the laughter mattered, that it was the proof you were seen. Heard, now you know. It was the noise that kept them from noticing the rest of you. The tired you, the scared you, the hungry, aging, slightly limping you. You learn to smile into stillness, to let your jokes fall like feathers no one wants to catch. You tell them anyway. Not for them anymore. For rhythm, for ritual. No. For the shape your mouth has memorized. You become part of the background. It's like the rug, like the smoke, like the slightly off-key harp that no one repairs but everyone swears they enjoy. The fool is not dismissed. He simply stops being noticed, but still, you bowed. Because if you don't, if you straighten your back too far or lift your chin too high, they might remember you're a person. And then they'll have to decide what to do with you. And they've never been good at that, so you stay bent. You smile. You speak your riddles to the chairs, the curtains, the crack in the wall that used to resemble a duke's profile. And when they rise to leave, you nod, because even without laughter, the act must go on. When things grow tense at court, and they always do, you're called. Not the general, not the chancellor, not the priest. You, because laughter is not just for delight, it's a release valve, a ceremonial exhale. When the nobles are close, to open insult, when the queen has not smiled in 3 days, when the steward has started breaking bread like it owes him something, you are summoned. You're the air between clenched teeth. You always know. You can smell it in the roast, taste it in the wine. Tension has a flavor metallic, like a coin you bit too. Hard, so you shuffle in, bells jangling, hat tilted, voice bright enough to reflect off the dullest lord. You tell a tale about a knight who tried to joust with a fish, a riddle involving a nun and a pear. Something about tax collectors marrying. It's their own ledgers. They laugh. The mood breaks. You have done your duty. This isn't comedy, it's diplomacy with feathers. The court is a theater, and you're the curtain drawing open, drawing closed, revealing only what's safe to look at. There's a moment at one feast when you hear 2 dukes arguing in code. Polite words sharpen like blades. The queen shifts in her seat. The king grips his goblet like he's imagining it's a skull. You leap metaphorically into the tension, juggling words like they're eggs over a pit. It works. For now, they laugh again. They forget what they almost said. You're a tool, yes, but a sacred one. A bright shield against whatever grim thing was about to take root. A clown-shaped broom that sweeps blood off the table before it spills. They'll never. Thank you, but they'll need you again soon, because power hates quiet. And you, with your bells and riddles, are the noise that keeps the cracks from widening. You're not just joking. You're keeping the crown from shattering. Asterisk. Asterisk, they say. You're the center of the room, that everyone watches you. When you speak, the court leans in. But you know better. You're not the fire. You're the smoke. Visible, entertaining, a little irritating, but not where the heat is. While you spin riddles about turnips with ambitions and bishops who fall in love with cheese, the real business hums beneath the laughter. Nobles lean close. Scrolls are passed under napkins. Rings tapped once, twice, against goblets and secret rhythms. It's not your court. You're just the noise they use to muffle something else. One time. You're doing your finest imitation of the steward's voice. All wheeze and smugness, and the room roars. Behind them, the king signs a decree, a new tax. On flour, or maybe freedom. No one notices. Another time you're telling a tale about a donkey that becomes a magistrate. Everyone's howling. Meanwhile, the queen slips a folded note into the bishop's sleeve. You see it. You say nothing. You never say anything. You're the perfect distraction. Not just because you're loud, but because you're expected to be meaningless. No one thinks the jester has teeth, or eyes, or a memory sharper than parchment. And so secrets are shared in your shadow. A lord once accused you of eavesdropping. You replied, "I only listen with my elbows." He laughed, then sent you 3 cakes and a request to perform at his daughter's wedding, which was canceled, quietly 2 weeks later. Sometimes you wonder if the jokes themselves are the deception. Not to entertain the court, but to keep you from looking too closely. You wonder if you're the audience, too, laughing at your own sleight of hand. But mostly, you just keep going, because that's what they want. You talk about frogs that open banks, about squirrels writing poetry. It's about kings who get smaller every time they lie, and while they laugh. The wheel turns, the court moves, and you're still standing in the middle. Brightly dressed and carefully unimportant. Asterisk, 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 there's a strange rule at court. If people are laughing, they're not scheming. Or at least, not as violently. Your job isn't to make them happy. It's to keep them busy. You tell a tale about a knight who falls in love with his horse. The court explodes in laughter. You juggle plums and misquote the Psalms. You perform. A mock duel using spoons and breadsticks. No one breathes too hard. No one draws a sword. Mission accomplished. Because without you, they'd find something else to do, and it wouldn't be juggling. It would be letters with wax seals and whispered offers in candlelit corners. It would be insults disguised as compliments and poisoned. Wine with polite excuses. But as long as you're on the dais, dancing badly and quoting imaginary philosophers, they hesitate. No one wants to launch a coup during a joke about trousers. You remember one banquet where 2 barons were seated too close? Their families had feuded for decades over sheep, or pride, or both. You were told no dancing, no rhyming. Just keep them distracted. So you spent 2 hours narrating a fictional soap opera about a cabbage that joined a monastery. It made no sense. It didn't need to. They laughed. The barons didn't speak. No one bled. They called it a success. You once suggested, gently, musically, that the court might consider solving disputes with peating contests instead of swords. They laughed. Then they considered it. Briefly, then the steward banned. Pie competitions for a year. Just in case, you know your place. You're the leash wrapped in velvet, the harness painted in gold. You make nobility look civilized by giving them something else to look at, something harmless. Something ridiculous, They don't call it control, they call it entertainment. But every time a noble unclenches his fist to applaud, that's one less dagger being drawn. Every time a duchess laughs until she cries, she forgets why she was angry. You keep the mood soft, and softness is safety, because war begins with silence, and you make sure the room stays noisy. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The king doesn't announce when he's in a bad mood. He breathes heavier. He stirs his wine like it insulted him, taps the hilt of his dagger, not like he'll use it. Just like he wants everyone to remember it's there, and that's when they send for you. Not out of affection, out of strategy. A nervous glance. From the chamberlain, muttered, "Perhaps now would be a good time." You're handed a lute. You don't really play. Pushed into a room like a sponge tossed into a fire. You bow, carefully. You start with something light, a joke about dogs in court robes. A story about a noble who married his own reflection. Something safe. Direction. You watch him closely, like a weather vane in the middle of a thunderstorm. He's trying to predict which way the lightning will fall. If he chuckles relief, if he smiles, a miracle. If he says nothing, you keep going. You move to a dance, an impression, a risky pun about royal boots. The court holds its breath through all of it. You're not performing. You're diffusing. The jester is not the fire. He's the bucket of awkward, squeaky water. They all rely on you. Every noble, every cook, every child playing with a wooden sword in the corner. If you succeed, they eat. If you fail, they prepare. Explanations. And no one wants to be explaining things to a furious king in velvet who's eaten too much and liked it too little. One evening, he throws a cup. It misses the steward. You're summoned immediately. You arrive with a hat full of feathers and a song about birds that envy taxes. He laughs. Not because it's funny, but because he needed to hear something dumber than his own thoughts. You bow again. Later, someone pats your shoulder. The steward, maybe? Or a ghost. You don't check. Because even when it works, especially, when it works, no one thanks the shield. They just polish it and hang it back on the wall. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They need you until they don't. The court is a machine built on pressure. Every favor granted adds weight. Every secret whispered makes the gears creak. Every glance held too long between a baron's wife and a visiting knight tightens something invisible. And you're the hiss, the vent. It's a little escape valve that squeaks and rattles just enough to keep the whole thing from exploding. You joke about the queen's dog. You mime the bishop snoring. During prayers, you say things no one else dares, but always with a grin and a hat shaped like a fruit basket. And the machine keeps turning. Until it does. One day you make a joke that lands wrong. Not offensive, not cruel, just flood. The king blinks. The nobles look elsewhere. Few chuckle. Too late. Too forced. You bow slowly. It echoes in. Your spine like a warning bell. That night, no one asks for a performance. Your porridge is cold. The steward forgets your name. You're still here, but something's shifted. You practice in your room, juggling peeled apples and muttering new rhymes about taxation and trousers. You pull out the duck mask. Try it again. It used to work. Now it just smells faintly of mildew and lost timing. They don't say you failed. No one ever says it. They just forget to remember you. It gets quieter, and that's worse than mockery. Worse than being scolded. You're a ghost in colored cloth, bright on the outside, faded on the inside. Still. Moving, but not for anyone. You try again the next day. Story about a noble's wig getting stolen by bees. The laughter is polite. It dies halfway between the fire and the flagstones. You bow again, not because they asked, but because the motion feels safer than standing still. Eventually, they'll replace you. Quietly a younger fool. Louder bells. Shinier shoes. Maybe someone. Who can sing while walking on his hands? You'll still be there, in the corner, smiling, just in case they need to laugh again. But you'll know. The valve doesn't matter when the boiler finds a crack. You speak truths for a living, but only the kind that wear disguises. You can say the king is greedy, so long as you say it while pretending to be a goat. You can point out the treasury is empty if you sing it to the tune of a drinking song and rhyme debt with regret. You can mention that the nobles are all cousins now, and the family tree looks more like a wreath, as long as you're dancing while you say it. That's the rule. Truth is allowed.
Oh.
As long as no one says that's what it is. The moment someone points to you and says, he has a point, the mood shifts. Jokes become threats. Riddles become confessions. And you become something dangerous, a man who meant it. So you master the art of implication, walk the tightrope of inference. You hide daggers in jokes about potatoes once. You told a story about a chicken who ran a court more wisely than its king. Everyone laughed. The king laughed hardest. But the next day, the steward whispered that perhaps fewer jokes about poultry might be wise. Another time, you delivered a monologue from the point of view of a coin, a worn one, passed too many times between too few hands. Some found it clever, some found it unsettling. You were not invited to the next banquet, but they still kept you, as they needed the pressure eased, even if the pipe sometimes rattled. You learn to pace your honesty. Mix it with silliness like ashes in bread. Enough to be noticed, never enough to be chewed. They want their truths covered in honey, dipped in bells, wrapped in colors that make it look accidental, and you give them. That, you're a mirror with a mustache. A song that forgets its last verse. A joke that sounds harmless until it isn't single. You can say anything as long as no one repeats it. Outside the hall, and certainly not when the king is sober. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The hall is full. Overflowing, torches guttering. In iron sconces, long tables, sagging under the weight of roasts and rumors. There's music. Always music played by musicians too skilled to smile. Nobles chatter like well-dressed geese, heads bobbing, hands gesturing, voices rising like steam. You walk in, and the laughter begins. Not because you've said anything, but because your presence is already a punchline. They know you. Or think they do. They clap when you slip. They cheer when you mispronounce Latin on purpose. You perform, of course. That's the role. How about a story about a noble with a nose? So large, he used it as a wine shelf. A puppet skit, where one puppet eats all the other puppets. It doesn't mean anything. That's why it works. But when the feast ends, and the candles shrink into stubs, they all walk out in pairs, in groups, in families. You don't. There's no seat for you at the table. Not really. Sometimes you're allowed a corner, a stool, near the leg of a bench, sometimes a plate. If someone generous remembers, you're not fed by applause alone. You're surrounded by people, but you aren't with them. You learn to nod at them without expecting nods back. To offer jokes that ripple through the air and disappear before reaching you. Once, Noble claps your shoulder and says, "I've never seen you leave." You smile in reply. "That's because I never arrive." He laughs, then forgets you. Entirely. Even the servants keep a distance. They respect you maybe, or fear you, or resent you. It's hard to tell. You're not one of them. But you're not one of them either. As always, the strange thing in the middle, bright, loud, useful, but not invited. You perform for the crowd. But when the chairs are empty, you're still standing because you were never meant to sit. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk eyes follow you everywhere. Not lovingly, not even curiously. Just constantly. A stain on a white sheet always noticed, never examined. You can't walk through the great hall without heads turning. A whisper here, a grin there. The occasional nudge and watch. What he does next? Doesn't matter if you're carrying a jug or just looking for the privy. You are a living spectacle, a walking pause in the day. But none of them really see you. They see the bells, the hat, the crooked walk you exaggerate. They hear the high voice you've trained to sound like cheerful nonsense. They never see the person underneath, the one who limps for real when the room is empty. You once walked silently through the cloister, hoping to be alone. A servant gasped and said, "You scared me." We... jingling, as though silence itself was treasoned. So, now you jingle all the time, even when you sleep. You once tried to sit in the garden and read an old book someone left behind. Within minutes, 2 nobles passed and asked if you were about to juggle the flowers. You laughed. Of course, but you never tried again. Being watched is part of the job. Being seen would be a problem. If they see you as real, they'll wonder why you're dressed like a joke. They'll wonder if anything you said was serious. They might remember things you said last week. They might question how you knew about Lord Denrick's hunting accident before it was public. And then the mask cracks, so you maintain the spectacle. A little louder, a little brighter, a little more absurd. You carry a wooden chicken for no reason. You recite poetry backwards. Dance when you're tired. You laugh first. Always first, so no one thinks. You're trying to be clever, because clever is threatening, and fools aren't supposed to be threatening, so you're watched relentlessly. But no one ever asks how you are, and that's exactly how they want it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They say the court is a place of rules, strict ones, ancient ones, mostly unread and frequently made up on the spot. Everyone bows a certain way, speaks in turns, eats in silence until the first noble coughs. You're supposed to know the order of precedence, the latest scandal, the correct fork for fish, in which Bishop is secretly illiterate this week. But you do none of that, and somehow you're allowed. You speak out of turn. You sit on the floor. You interrupt the king with a riddle about sausages. You bring a duck into a council meeting and name it Chancellor. They laugh. Mostly, you're the only one who gets away with it, because you're not part of the system. You're the hole in the curtain that everyone pretends isn't there. You're the thunderclap in the middle of a quiet song. An acceptable breach, a sanctioned embarrassment. But don't mistake that for freedom. They don't forgive you because you're special. They forgive you because you're useful. You make the court feel tolerant. Look how well they endured this buffoon. Look how they laugh at themselves through you. Your existence is proof that they are above pettiness. They can take a joke, even when they can't. You once mimed the bishop's sermon using only vegetables, the nobles roared. The bishop smiled. 2 days later, your blanket went missing. In February, you once made a joke about the queen's third cousin's unfortunate hair. That cousin no longer attends court. No one talks about it. You are allowed to say things that would end a knight's career because no one believes you. Mean them. It's a strange kind of power, sharp but made of paper. The more you use it, the more fragile it becomes, so you tread lightly. You are the exception, but exceptions are allowed only as long as they don't inspire others, and the moment someone else tries to joke like you, they'll be shown the rule. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The jest ends the night, not the prayers, not the wine, not even the king's final mutterings over mutton. It's you standing awkwardly near the hearth, bells quiet for once, face tilted just enough to suggest absurd wisdom. You deliver your closing line. Something about ducks and destiny, or taxes and trousers. It doesn't matter. The joke lands like a feather on a carpet. Soft, light, enough. They laugh, not loudly, but they laugh. That's the signal. The feast is done. The mood has been managed. The tension smoothed out like a wrinkle in velvet. You bow. It's always the bow. And then, like clockwork, they rise. Chairs scrape. Servants appear. Robes are adjusted, hats retrieved, gossip resumed like a book left open. The court reforms itself instantly, effortlessly, as if your act was a blink in a long, heavily perfumed dream. You watch them file out, laughing at new things already. Someone trips. Someone frowns. Someone whispers about the bishop again. It's all moving forward. It's like a wheel that never needed you to spin it, just needed you to distract from the sound. You are not dismissed. You are not thanked. You simply step back into the tapestry. You store your props. You fold your hat. You speak no words on the walk back to your corner. It's not a room, not really. It's just a nook behind the steward's quarters where the wind sounds like questions no one asked. There's half a crust, a cracked mug, a sock you don't remember stealing. It's enough. Could you sit? And tomorrow, they'll summon you again, because someone will frown. Someone will sulk. A duke will say too much. Chambermaid will cry. The king will stew. The queen will raise an eyebrow, and you'll rise. You'll dance. You'll joke. Bleed cheerfully into their silence, because the court never ends. It just waits for the next act. Asterisk, asterisk, and now. The laughter fades. Not all at once, but like candles blown out one by one across a long, echoing hall. You can still hear footsteps somewhere in the background. Someone's coughing. Chair creaks. Bell stirs where no one's moving. Been with him, the fool, longer than anyone else was willing to sit. You saw what no one clapped for. Heard the jokes that weren't meant to be funny. felt the chill behind the warmth and the silence beneath the cheer. Thank you for staying through all of it. If you're still awake or only half asleep, maybe this is the right moment to pause. Stretch a little, pull your blanket closer. Another story will come, another echo will begin, and you know it will repeat tomorrow, as it always does.